Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Claire Wasserman here. It's been a while since we've done one of these LinkedIn Lives. I love inviting women to come on and just share their expertise as it relates to helping you earn more and live better. You know why? Because that's our mission here at Ladies Get Paid. We are a global community educational organization and a book all about helping women level up in their lives and along with that, their bank accounts. Today's guest is Amy Yip, or Amy C. Yip. If you Google her, make sure you put the word coaching after that. You'll find out why. Now everybody's navigating away. Sorry about that. But stay here because Amy's going to be talking about mental fitness. She is a somatic life transformation and mental fitness coach, keynote speaker, self-confidence trainer, and the author of a new book called Unfinished Business, Breaking Down the Great Wall Between Adult Child and Immigrant Parents. So we're going to be spending a good chunk of today's conversation talking about what mental fitness is and how you can develop it. And then we'll go into her book. So Amy, thanks so much for being here. I know we had to reschedule, so we're doing it now. And I would just love to kick this off by asking you, first and foremost, what is a somatic life transformation and mental fitness coach? And I'm sure part of that is your journey of how you got there. We oftentimes, to solve our own problems, we end up becoming experts in them and then want to give to others. I have a feeling that might be your story. So welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be here. So it is part of my story. In January of 2020, my husband and I sold all our belongings. We left our big corporate jobs and we took a one-way flight to Ghana to volunteer at a breast cancer nonprofit. And our dream was that we would volunteer for a few months and then we would travel the world. It was this dream of ours. And what ended up happening in 2020, if you still remember that, COVID came along. Borders in Ghana ended up closing for 7 months and we were stuck in Ghana. And so what was supposed to be this amazing trip around the world we were stuck in Ghana. And then, when borders finally reopened, we started living and working nomadically, but most of the world was still closed off to Americans. So it wasn't really the traveling. It was, we worked and lived in places that would take us in. And the thing is, most people will hear my story and say, oh, that was so amazing. And it took so much courage. I wish I could do that. And after the but, there's always some kind of a reason, right? And I want to look at everyone and say, I was no more courageous than any of you. I had a lot of the shoulds. And the biggest should of all that I had during that time was I was heading into my late 30s and everyone had an opinion about my fertility of, hey, you're getting old. You should probably start having kids and probably give up this travel the world thing. You could do that when you retire. And someone even said to me, your eggs are rotting. So, you really need to get on that. And it was the most horrible thing. Don't ever say that to somebody. But I went on this journey of trying to navigate, well, what do I really want to do next in my life? Do I actually pursue my dreams or do I not? Everything from reading books to going on an ayahuasca ceremony down in Peru to finally getting a coach. And my coach is actually the person that helped me realize, one, I'm not in control. Even if I'm in if I don't pursue my dream, I'm not in control of whether or not I can have kids. A lot of us are on this fertility journey. And so I'm not in control of that, but I am in control of whether or not I pursue my dream. And the other thing that I learned was I want to be a coach and I want to change how people think about their circumstances. And so this journey of getting to this point where I quit my job and had this big dream and then ended up getting stuck in Ghana and not really getting to live that dream really helped me to build my mental fitness and to understand that it's not your circumstance that impacts you, right? It really is your mindset that makes all the difference in your happiness and success.
Yeah, a word that you use, the word control, I think a lot about the balance of control and command. So taking command of is not the same thing as thinking you have taken control of. So I'm curious, I mean, we'll go way more into depth of like what mental fitness is and how to develop it and maintain it and leverage it. But I would love for you to maybe dig into the nuance for a second of like, yeah, that control and command, right? Like the author of your own story, but like it also is going to unfold as it's going to unfold. So how do you maybe just emotionally and mentally like wrap yourself around that, the like moving forward and taking action while it simultaneously accepting, letting go? They seem contradictory, right?
They do. And the analogy I always love to use is either surfing or sailing. So you
Okay.
have a point that you're trying to get to and you're going that way, but winds will do their thing. The waves will do their thing and you can't control it. Like if you've ever been on a surfboard and you're trying to fight the waves and fight the wind, you fall off. And so it's really about, okay, I'm heading this way, but as winds and waves do their thing, how do I navigate with what comes my way instead of trying to fight it? And I always like to encourage people to think about what's really in my control and what is not in my control. And really the only thing that's within my control is how I respond. You know, when I got stuck in Ghana, I could have responded with being really upset and pissed and, you know, I'm just going to sit here and be upset for 7 months. Or I have the choice of saying, okay, well, I'm stuck here and I can't do anything about it. But what do I want to do with my time here?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amazing. When did you decide that mental fitness? I mean, A, like, what is that as a term, you know, and B, when did you decide that was the thing you wanted to focus on?
So mental fitness is, I'll define it. It's essentially your capacity to respond to life's challenges with a positive mindset rather than getting upset and stressed.
Okay.
Right.
I like that.
And if you use a physical analogy to bring it to life, if you have average physical fitness, you could climb small hills pretty easily, right?
Mhm.
But if I gave you a big hill, you would probably be climbing it out of breath, your legs would be shaking, your heart would be pounding. And so the same thing is happening with many of us today with all the things that are thrown at us is we all have average mental fitness. And so we could handle those small things, but when high levels, those big mountains get put in front of us, we're challenged.
Mm-hmm. 1,000%.
Yeah.
And I think we all saw that in the pandemic. Something I've always just wondered is how do we stay connected to ourselves so that it doesn't take a massive, disastrous, unexpected thing to shake us or wake us, whether it be external like a pandemic or sometimes internal where all of a sudden you're just burnt out or depressed and then you realize you need to make a change. So I guess that brings me to the real question of where do we begin to develop that mental fitness and do it in a consistent way?
Yeah, I love that question. So the research has shown there's essentially 3 core muscles to building mental fitness. The first one is saboteur interceptor. The
Okay.
second is sage perspective. And the third is self-command. And if you're wondering what the heck are those, don't worry, I'm going to dive into each of those. So in order to understand the muscles, we have to talk about the 2 sides of our brain, right? So an analogy I like to use is Star Wars. So there's this one side of your head that's kind of like the Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this other side that's like that inner Jedi. And most of us have probably experienced this battle between the 2 sides, right? And that's exactly what is happening in our head. So you could think of that Darth Vader as your saboteurs.
Mm-hmm.
The inner Jedi is your sage, that deeper wisdom that you have. And sometimes they go to battle with each other. And so it is about the saboteur interceptor muscle is all about how do I intercept those saboteurs that are messing with me? And then how do I strengthen the sage side of what's happening, right? The research has shown there's essentially 10 different saboteurs. There's 10 saboteurs that exist. The first one is the judge. The judge judges in 3 different ways. Judges ourselves, also known as inner critic, judges others, like, oh, that one's not good enough, that's stupid, that's, too slow, whatever it is. And then the third is judgment of circumstances. So during COVID, that was the one that, came up for a lot of people, judgment of this is a bad situation, right? So aside from the judge, there's 9 other saboteurs. There's the controller, hyperachiever, restless, stickler, pleaser, hypervigilant, avoider, victim, hyperrational.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, everybody, there's a quiz that you can take,
Yes.
and I think it's free. And Amy, when Amy's done, when we're done with this chat, she's going to be going onto the Ladies Get Paid LinkedIn page and putting in her own links, but also maybe you could drop the links to this quiz for those who are interested in exploring more about who their saboteurs are.
Yeah. And that's exactly. So your first step is to figure out, like, what are my saboteurs? How do they mess with me? So one of my top saboteurs is hyperachiever. I know it messes with me in the middle of the night, or when I'm about to go to sleep, it'll say, oh, just one more email. Oh, just one more thing. And I'm like, next thing you know, it's 2, 3 in the morning. I'm like, what did I just do? And so I'm aware of that. So the first step of intercepting your saboteur is 1, knowing which saboteurs you have, and 2, knowing how they mess with you, because awareness is the most important thing. So going on there, taking that free quiz, it takes like 10 minutes, and it's really scary how accurate it is. You had asked me how I got into this. It was because when I got stuck in Ghana, I took the quiz, and I was like, oh my gosh, they know me.
Yeah, right.
That was how I discovered it.
It's like everyone knows Strengths Finders, but I feel like it's actually more important to start by knowing your saboteurs, because you can't develop your strengths if you constantly have obstacles, especially inner obstacles, getting in the way of those strengths.
Yeah.
So I've taken this quiz too. I love that you're bringing this up.
Yeah. And it really is awareness of the lies that they tell you, because it is a lie, right? My hyperachiever saboteur is constantly telling me, you're going to be happy when you achieve the thing, when you get to the top of the mountain. And the truth is, am I really happy? For those who have hyperachiever, are you really happy? If you're anything like me, I'm almost at the top. I can see it. I know I'm going to get there, and I'm already looking for the next mountain. And it's this constant mountain after mountain, which leads to burnout. And I'm not actually happy, right? So that first muscle is the saboteur interceptor. The second muscle is the sage perspective. And the sage perspective is all about understanding that there's a gift and opportunity in every situation or circumstance.
Yeah.
Right. It's hard to understand that in the moment, but if you actually go back and look at your life, the highs and lows of your life, oftentimes the highs were only made possible because of a low point. And
I did this exercise. I have a class that I teach called How to Make Money Out of Lemons. And I literally chart it. I show it on a big screen. I'm like, here are all the quote shitty things: getting sued for gender discrimination by a group of men's rights activists, led to a book deal, ultimately. Getting a divorce led to coming out as a lesbian and finding the love of my life. Like my parents' own divorce, led to and moving around a lot, led to my ability to be a chameleon. The wage gap led to Ladies Get Paid. I mean, it's like you cannot have the positive without the negative. So to try to fight it is wasting energy.
Yeah.
So when you say in the experience of when you're having a low point, like, how do you react to it in a way that embraces it, but maybe not with that quote toxic positivity, right? Like you don't want to deny your emotions.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what you think about that.
It is kind of like if you put your hand on a hot stove, it is good for you to feel the pain. But the question is, how long do you want to keep your hand on the stove? And it's the same thing, right? So you have your hand on the hot stove, you feel that emotion, that sensation. And then you can choose, okay, well, what do I want to do about it? How do I want to change things? Where do I want to focus? Or do I want to keep my hand on the hot stove and just sit in that and let it simmer and be in that space, right? And so that's the difference. And Albert Einstein has one of my favorite quotes, which is the most important decision we make is whether we believe we live in a friendly or hostile universe. And research has actually shown that 80% of what you're calling your experience gets generated from what's in here. It's all about perspective, right? Only 20% comes from the actual external situation and circumstances. And where focus goes, energy flows. If you were to leave this talk and say, you want to go buy a red Jeep, guess what you're going to see a ton of when you walk out of here? You're going to see a ton of red Jeeps. And is it because everybody all of a sudden was like, I'm going to buy a red Jeep? No, it's because that's where your focus is. So you can actually choose, do I want to focus on all the bad stuff, and how horrible this is and how it sucks and, how lemony it is? Or do you want to focus on, well, what is the gift? How can I turn this into a gift?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then how did you do it? Like, yeah, I mean, you have this realization, okay, I think I might want to be a coach and this is how I want to, focus, but then you actually have to put it into place. And that's, I guess, where the consistency part comes into.
Yes, that it's all about practice and consistency. So, so that term somatic in my title, somatic is all about the body. And oftentimes we want to change with just thinking about it. So we know we want to change, we know how to change, and yet we don't change, right? It's this morning I worked with a client on saying no. And she knows she wants to say no. And saying no is a 2-letter word that all of us can do. And yet it's hard for her to do, right? And so somatics is really about the body and the wisdom of the body and the fact that our tissues have knowledge, our muscles have memory. It's kind of like why the first time you rode a bike, drove a car, played a sport, you probably fumbled, had to think a lot about it. But by the 10th, 100,000th time, your body remembered. And so our body remembers a certain way, and it requires us to practice consistently to teach it a new way of doing things.
Mm-hmm. Is this related to the sage part? Because I realized we didn't get in too deep into the, we got the saboteurs and then we got like the sage wisdom and developing that, I'm assuming, is connected to somatic practices.
Yeah, it's about the practice, but there's a third muscle that comes in between the two. And because if you're kind of hijacked by your saboteurs, it's going to be hard to automatically be like, oh, well, what's the gift or opportunity here, right? Because you're kind of spiraling in that. And so there's something called there's a third muscle that you can build, which is the self-command muscle. And self-command muscle is essentially something that can help you to shift. So for example, one of the self-command muscles, do you want to do one together?
Yeah, hell yeah. Love it.
So you could keep your eyes open. You could close your eyes. I want you to take 2 of your fingertips, rub them together with such attention. You can feel all the sensations of touch. Notice all the ridges. And then you can let that go. That was maybe 10 seconds. What did you notice?
Well, I noticed how much I ignore that, like there's this body part with all these nuances and I just take it for granted. Yeah. So maybe I immediately went into my mind. I started to like analyze the experience, because this is like what I have a tendency to do as I was having it. So I'm present, but I'm also like narrating at the same time. So that was my takeaway.
That's great self-awareness. So, but if I were to actually put your head under an MRI machine, what you would actually notice is that the side where your saboteurs live ever so slightly quieted, and the side that your sage lives in ever so slightly got activated. Right. So that was just 10 seconds. Imagine if you did it for a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is, step 1 is to know that you're in saboteur mode. Mm-hmm. So saboteur is always, I hate using this word negative emotion because I really don't believe negative emotion. But if you're feeling things like stress or anger or frustration, any of those things, then first step is stop. That means you're in saboteur mode. Right. The second step is to then do a rep. It could be something like the fingertip one. It could be something like listening to sounds. It could be noticing the rising and falling of your breath as you breathe in and out. It could be, one of my favorites is to wiggle all 10 of your toes and feel each of your toes. And you just, notice that, because it brings me joy to do that. But it's called focused attention. How do you focus your attention on something? And then when you feel that shift, then you can pose that question, which is the sage side. What's the gift or opportunity here? How can I turn this into gift or opportunity? And so those are the 3 steps that you put together, and it's a practice. But the first step is always becoming aware of which are my top saboteurs. How do they mess with me? And at first, it's going to take longer for you to catch it, for you to notice it. And don't get into that point of berating yourself that like, oh, I didn't catch it. It took me forever, right? It'll get easier and easier as you practice, just like riding a bike.
Okay, I love that. Before we switch focus into your book, anything else you want to talk about in regards to mental fitness and, you know, some of the somatic life transformation stuff?
I think that's pretty much it. There's 3 muscles. Go take your assessments, right? Get to know your saboteurs. And it's great to have a partner in crime so that you could call each other on it. So when I first started this work, I made my husband take the assessment also and go through the program with me. And one of my top saboteurs is also hypervigilant. His is hyper rational.
Yeah.
Which, you know, battles each other. And I have controller and he's got avoider. And so it's amazing learning about the saboteurs in partnerships too, and coworkers and other relationships, because you're like, oh, I get it now. I get why we're interacting like that.
Yes. And how it can repel each other, but also fantastic because it can fulfill each other's sort of deficits, or, you know, there's an opportunity as well for balance when you have 2 people who have different things that they're dealing with. One last thing I actually just want to note. Have you read the book Mindsight?
Yeah.
Yeah, by Daniel Siegel. So I recommend that to everybody. Mindsight, The New Science of Personal Transformation by Daniel Siegel. A lot of it speaks to what Amy has been talking about today. I think it's a fantastic book if you're interested in figuring this stuff out further. And as I said earlier, come on over to the Ladies Get Paid LinkedIn page if you're not watching it here, because Amy's going to be posting a link to the assessment along with her information. I think a good transition, though, to this book that you just wrote called Unfinished Business is, well, A, tell me about the book, but B, I'm sure you learned way more about your own saboteurs and, you know, sage self as you dug into this book, because it was interviews with your parents and just generations before us. And that contributes to, as you said, the muscle memory, right?
Yeah.
The things that get handed down. So yeah. So first tell us about, you know, what the book is and the process of maybe like self-discovery as you wrote it.
Yeah. So the book it was inspired by a client of mine who was trying to figure out what does she want to do next in her career. And then as we were going through this process, she said, oh, but I can't pursue it until my dad passes away.
Oh, man.
She was 55-year-old senior vice president, one of the largest banks, Chinese American woman. And she basically said, well, you know, my dad had an expectation I'd become president next. And around my dad, I go into little girl mode. And I'm so afraid of his disappointment, disapproval, of his criticisms. So I'd rather just wait. And I started seeing this pattern in a lot of my clients where a lot of their fears, their insecurities, it had to do with their upbringing and their relationship with their parents. And there was this tension, right? But many people weren't willing to have those conversations. And the interesting fact that I learned along the way was that I forget the exact statistics, so don't quote me, but something like 30 or 50% of our memory is made up. We make up our memory, right? So what we remember of our parents is actually probably not all correct. And we will focus on only certain memories and forget others that does not support what we believe. So I started wondering, what are the stories that I have and what are the real stories from my parents' side? So I embarked on this journey 3 years ago, spent 40 plus hours in conversation with my parents. And I will say the first 20, 25, they were hard, they were difficult. They challenged my mental fitness skills. I had to practice a lot of patience. But what I uncovered is that my parents are human beings, just like all of our parents. They have hopes, they have dreams, they have fears, and they have their own saboteurs, and they're doing the best they can with what they have. And it really helped me to see my parents' humanity. And so the book it shares all of the myths, the stories that I had about my parents and our relationship. It then shares their side of the story and, you know, what they had told me and how they experienced me. And then there's something in the book called A Date with Your Parents, so that the reader can go on a date with their parents. There are questions and prompts for you to ask your own parents.
I'm obsessed with this. I didn't know it was structured in that way of like, this is the myth or the narrative that I've been holding on to, and then what actually happened. So this is a huge piece of the work that I did when I got my certificate in behavioral finance and financial psychology. We literally had homework assignments around interviewing our parents or our caretakers through the lens of their relationship with money to better understand our own. So just what are some of like the key things that you pulled, that struck you in these interviews?
So speaking of money, I have a whole chapter on money because I grew up with this frugal mindset because I grew up in an immigrant household with very little money. And so I grew up thinking I don't deserve to spend money on myself. I don't deserve to charge people money. Kind of, I've been reading your posts about stuff like that, right? Like I can't charge people money. I'm trying to help people. Right. And it was interesting because I talked to my parents about it and they're like, we were immigrants. We were not salaried. We were per hour, right? We could barely make ends meet. And that was different than what a lot of people are doing today. They're overworking themselves, killing themselves, but it's not like you make more money by working extra, right? Mm-hmm. And we worked so hard so that you could enjoy life. And wow. that was a huge thing for me of like, and my parents were like, you should spend money. There's always money to go around, spend money, make money. Like, that's the whole point of money. You don't just, it's not, and so I was like, really? And that struck me. And it was the other thing that my parents said that really stuck with me was that, in order for our world to get better, it's about everybody coming together. It's not about race or ethnicity or sexuality or any of that stuff, but we all have to come together in kindness and really see each other as human beings. Mm-hmm. And I never thought my parents thought like that.
Mm-hmm. 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 Right. It's like we have to let them evolve because like we knew them in a certain snapshot of time, but whether they were sharing, because that's the thing. I mean, your understanding of who they were may have been quite accurate at that time also.
Yeah. And one of my favorite learnings from a relationship workshop that I attended is that we are always looking at the person in front of us as if they were the same person from 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yet, we're all changing. And so can you look at that person in front of you as a completely new person today and let go of your assumptions about who they are?
And I would say that would be the perfect thing to say to yourself looking in the mirror too.
Yeah.
Right. We've got about 2 minutes left. So I would love for you to share whatever you feel like the wisdom you had in your training through the book, whether it's mental fitness related or not, you have so much to share. So I would love for you to, anything you haven't yet said that you feel like would be relevant to this conversation that you think people should know, including how to people find you, follow you, and most importantly, pay you.
I think the most important thing is to start with kindness. Kindness for yourself, kindness for those around you. Kindness makes such a huge difference. We're humankind, and we forget that. So start with kindness. And if you want to find me, you can visit my website, amyyipcoaching.com. So that's AMYYIP coaching.com. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, Amy C. Yip. Amy C. Yip. So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook.
Actually, now I have my last question is, tell me about this ayahuasca trip. Like, what did you discover during it? I mean, I'm massively pregnant right now, so can't do it. But it had been on my bucket list. So, what was that experience like?
I did a 5-night, or it was 3 nights of ceremonies, and each night was different. They say ayahuasca gives you what you need, what you want, not what you want. So I went in with wanting the answer, do I have babies or do I travel the world and pursue my dreams, right? And instead what it gave me was, the first night I was burning. I just visualized myself burning. I was in a lot of pain. And I saw my husband just show up.
Wow.
He held me and I let him. And if you had known me before, I was this tough woman. I don't need your help. Don't hold me. I could get through it on my own. I let him, and it felt nice. And that taught me the value of asking for help, being vulnerable, and letting people help you and take care of you. And it felt nice, and that was a big, big shift for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I got goosebumps. And also that's what in order to be a coach, that's what your clients need to do with you. Like they have to be vulnerable enough to be allowed to be helped too. So it was like you had to learn it yourself in order to be able to participate with others in that way. So good. Thank you, Amy. You are fantastic. I wish this was longer, but 30 minutes, I got a lot out of it. I know everybody else did too. So remember, come on over to Ladies Get Paid LinkedIn, watch this recording, check out the links that Amy's about to post. And of course, come over to ladiesgetpaid.com. We've got a community of over 55,000 people who all support each other through giving career and money advice. And of course, there's educational workshops and webinars and boot camps, etc. I'm Claire Wasserman. You can find me on LinkedIn as well as clairewasserman.com and Claire Gets Paid on Instagram. Thank you all so much for being here today. And we'll see you at another LinkedIn Live. Now go get paid. Bye.